the last one, uh, the last piece, because I think it's a really interesting one, because it's the space around the area where, pressure is a privilege. Australian cricket, especially for those that don't really know it, there's that statement that the captain of the Australian cricket team is it's the most important job in Australia after the Prime Minister, and it's an argument among many that it's a more important job than that. What is the story that stands out to you that sort of punctuates your experience in Australian cricket? Because there's lots of different directions you can take this.
Oh, and I'm really happy to be. You want to ask me about it? I think what I was good at was making decisions when no one else wanted to make one, and there are some really interesting pressure situations. I could talk about Sandpaper Gate, and I'll probably give you an idea here, but it was not by far one of the easier management situations that I'd ever dealt. Like, the answer was clear, and that was the interesting one. The death of Phil Hughes was a far harder thing to deal with. And if I quarantine Phil and his passing and dealing with his family and that, the India were threatening to leave. You had a player association with you. We had to restructure a tour in, within 3 days, which usually takes you 6 months. It was a really difficult management decision-making process because the answer wasn't clear. I'll tell about Sandpaper Gate because a lot of people want to hear about it. It's all public, so it's not a problem, but it gets lost in the white noise, for want of a better term. But look, the sanction for scratching a ball in cricket is one game. That's the sanction. But I heard about this, woke up, jumped on a plane. So I just returned from India. I was at the Australian women's team in Mumbai, flew out to Johannesburg. I'd booked my flight before I'd spoken to anyone, knowing that I needed to get there. I needed to, what I talk about is turn into the wave. For the surfers out there, you go and confront it, go and attack it. So I knew I had to go. I went and dealt with it. It was very clear very quickly that there were 18 or so corroborating stories of one story that was different. And the one story was someone that was doing a bit of protection work, looks like, on himself. But I had a board. I had, you had the Prime Minister's office ringing the whole way through this period as well. So, what are you going to do? You need to go hard on these people. Prime Minister's ringing chairmans and chairman's ringing, being conference calls. It was all panic because everyone wanted to be seen to be doing something. At the same stage, I had a team that was going, well, it's one game sanction, all the other teams do it, and trying to bridge the gap between a country that will sack them for life versus one game, and you had to find a place to be able to deal with those that were involved. And the captain was involved, the vice captain was involved, and the young player. And for any conspiracy theories out there, I'm very convinced that's the picture. And there weren't, because there are people inside that want to disperse blame. Because as soon as you disperse blame, it's marketing 101 and crisis management. Find anyone else to point to. But the reality is, I am very convinced of this. It was just one person pressuring another person, and the captain had a chance to step in, and he didn't step in. And under pressure, I have a lot of sympathy for him because he had to make a momentary decision, but at the same stage, the sanction was easy. It was very interesting on the return to Australia. We made that decision. I physically told the players of their sanction, and there's a sort of relief once you get the sentence. People go, it's the not knowing for most people. That's the hard one. So once that was done, it was fine. What was really interesting then was the clean out. I remember my PA, and she was the facilitator for all, with me and the selectors, the coaches, and so, you know, the captain had gone, the vice captain had gone, the coach had gone. Then the chairman went and the CEO went, and she said, "Oh, that's got to be it." And I said, "Well, when you clean out, you have to clean out the whole spine of a business, and I'm the only one left." And it was a really interesting conversation because we had meetings with media, and I very clearly said, "Look, you know, certain players aren't going to come back on my watch," and guess what? They didn't. I wasn't there, and I actually respect that. I'm actually really comfortable that they made, you know, because this is how the media worked. This conversation went, and I quote, "You know, certain players are bad for an environment." And they went, "Yes." And they go, "Well, but you understand, we want the pantomime. We want the sinner and the saint." And you've got to understand the self-interest. And they were right. It's good TV to have a sinner and a saint. That's how every time you put a commentary team together, you put together a sinner and a saint. Every time you go and watch a reality TV show, someone will be positioned as the baddie versus the goodie. It's good TV. And it was a lesson that I learned in sport, the crossover and the grey of media versus the entertainment industry. And so I enjoyed all of that. I enjoyed the pressure of that. We didn't sleep for 3 days. We had to, those that stood up and took bullets, I respected. Those that ran away from the pressure, I didn't. And so I have a lot of time for Steve Smith. He went up and faced the camera right after the game. Now, the TV, the crisis management people will tell you it was a terrible decision. He'll tell you today it was a terrible decision. I also loved his courage. Goes back to you said about my dad earlier. You can't coach courage. I rate courage. So look, it was a privilege to be part of. Not something that I would wish upon anyone, but there are no great people. You get experiences and you get thrust in the middle of stuff and you turn towards the waves. So I found that and I'm happy to talk about it, really happy. It's a couple of years ago now. But it was I didn't, even with hindsight, I didn't see it as a hard thing, but it was very of media interest. I thought the media would blow over once the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games came over. That didn't happen, and it was one of those ones that just kept on going. So, because there were bigger things that happened over my 7 years in cricket that were washed over, and but this is the one that, because I think the Australian captain was involved, and they genuinely believe these gentlemen who are in their 30s, early 20s, the reality is they're the best leader of the top 7 batsmen in the country. That's what they are. But that's the politicians are the best leaders from elected and from a party. So they're look, don't get me wrong, I'm not belittling the Australian Test captain by any means. I'm just saying, and they're very, I know a lot of them and I respect them and I respect the job they've done. But that statement has got so much momentum that it, I think, puts undue pressure on what is often a very young man with often their experiences just playing cricket.
Yeah, and I think that's what I've always admired about you, and why I brought those other pieces in about Auschwitz, about study, about growing up as a carny. Even you recognise the world was a bigger place than just a test match or that space. Listen, we've got some phenomenal questions here. We've got about 20 minutes to go, mate. I recognise you giving up your time. I love this space.
Yep,
I've got a question here from Shane McCann. Shane, both Dubai and now Baden. So lives.
Shano's daughter, Shooter's my daughter. So if this is if we don't get through this one quickly, I can just pop over to his house and tell him.
Yeah.
His daughter's a genius.
His daughter is.
You're too kind, Pat. Gets it from a mum.
His daughter is he's a genius. Yeah, fantastic. What were the key non-negotiables that made the Brumbies such a successful foundation organisation? It's a really interesting, because for people in Australia, they'd see the same around the Melbourne Storm. There's certain franchises that just seem to get it right, but when you and a group of people that were brought together, the Brumbies were a magnificently successful organisation in Super Rugby. What were the non-negotiables that made it so?
Your point on the Melbourne Storm with the Brumbies is really good. Neither had the barriers of history. Neither of them had history hold them back. So, and I think, so what did we do in recruitment? We couldn't be the biggest, we couldn't be the strongest, so we had to be the smartest. So everyone we recruited in the first couple of years had a piece of paper, had a qualification, had a degree, had a trade. So we made sure our unique position was we were going to outthink everybody else. And there was no middle management. So there was the head coach and there was nothing else underneath. They were just the players had to fill the void. So I love that. And it's really interesting. I went from the Brumbies, which were like that, to Leicester, which was working class. And it was all hardest, strongest, work ethic, physicality. And the theme of both knew each other's cultural difference. You know, they knew what one was said, well, we have to have an educational edge. We have to outthink our opposition because others are going to figure us out. Leicester was, we're going to ground you down in the shitty months of December and January in England. We're going to kill you. We're going to stay in the fight. And I love that I got to play in two very different cultural programs. I know the Storm well. The head of operations there for the last 10 years, Frank Panisi, is a great mate. And, they measure performance. They look at individuals that can add to the culture. They are very, very clear on growing people and getting the best out of what they've got. So those organisations that know what they stand for, and it can be really different, just unites people behind a common cause. And I think they do that. So the Brumbies did that really, really well at the start, and they kept on that theme for a very long time. Certain coaches lost their way a little bit, but certain things brought it back. And, they still to this day are the most successful Australian team in Super Rugby throughout the years.
Yeah, fantastic. And really great insight.